It's harvest season, which means crops like sugar beets, potatoes, and onions are being pulled from the ground. This time of year, the daylight hours get shorter, but for those who work out here, the hours on the job remain just as long. For some farm workers,
Paramos y dice, okay,
it isn't your typical 8-hour shift.
agarren su break, 15 minutos. Es lo que nos dan.
Some days last 12 to 16 hours.
Pero para todo el día.
Sí,
Oh, wow.
sí.
It's a job only a few can take on.
Porque pues te bañas en sudor toda, porque y aparte el polvo que sale te pica, a algunas personas les da alergia.
Mari is from Mexico. She's been living and working in Idaho for more than 15 years.
Y a veces pues te resbalas y te caes y pues te lastimas un pie o algo, pero pues a pesar de todo eso necesitamos trabajar.
Almost as long as Ana.
Me voy a la papa, que es la papa temprana.
It's been 2 decades since she left Mexico to work the fields in Idaho.
Es en la noche y pues también es de estarla limpiando, sacando basura, botes, papa podrida, todo eso.
The manual labor isn't the only working condition consideration.
Cada año están sacando químicas nuevas.
It's a health risk the Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance says farm workers face from pesticide exposure.
So there's a lot of conditions, which makes sense why there's some people who don't want to do that work.
Some people might mean those who live here legally.
De como tu posición, ¿hay americanos?
No, casi la mayoría es puro mexicano.
For many of them, it's the only way to make a living due to their immigration status.
Pues porque es en lo que podemos trabajar, porque si vas a una compañía tienes que estar legal para poder tener ese trabajo.
A status that also bleeds into the social aspect.
Muchas de las veces los americanos yo pienso que en veces nos detestan por estar aquí, pero pues yo pienso que uno de mexicano es el que saca más el trabajo y que de ahí también comen los americanos. Y muchos no nos quieren.
But not every farm worker is undocumented. Some come from other countries under the H-2A Temporary Agriculture Worker Program.
Me da gusto que vengan, porque mi papá siempre decía, el sol sale para todos.
But domestic farm workers feel like farmers are starting to favor those in the program.
Y a nosotros pues ya nos están dejando como a un lado.
Hemos estado ahí y ellos van y vienen y como quiera la preferencia es para ellos.
And Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance and their sub-organization Visión 2C are taking notice.
A lot of times farm workers are seen as commodities and not human beings, so they're seeing the price tag instead of the actual human being that works behind that labor.
IDA's executive director, Irene Ruiz, says the goal is to help recognize the work that domestic workers do and to make sure that they are not forgotten.
They're the ones that are giving us, fuel in that economy, because a lot of the times H-2A workers end up going back to their countries of origin, and so they're taking, all of the monetary costs with them as well.
That's why IDA and Visión 2C are working year-round to help advocate for their working conditions.
And so I think it's crucial that we try to support farm workers in what we can to help alleviate some of those things that affect them.
And to help change the policy that Ruiz says isn't working.
We don't have rules and regulations. We have recommendations that come from OSHA.
And now farm workers' voices and concerns are being heard firsthand through Visión 2C's news story collection project.
My end goal is to get policy going to protect farm workers from heat, extreme heat, smoke inhalation, and pesticide poisoning. There needs to be a path to citizenship for our domestic workers. I feel like they deserve to be able to work in Idaho without living in fear if they're going to be deported.
And most of them simply asking.
Pues yo pienso que si nos hubieran más como humanos, pues sería mejor. Que tuviéramos derechos, algo así.
Because at the end of the day, working to provide a better future for their families is all many farm workers want, without the fear of being taken away from their loved ones.
Si hubiera una ley que apoyara a todas las personas que no estamos legalmente aquí, pues eso sería lo mejor del mundo.
Until that time comes, they'll go on working, finishing the harvest.
Somos importantes porque estamos ayudando para tener un alimento en la mesa para el mundo entero.
Still searching for answers a year later.
And what concerns me is them going out and doing it again and killing another innocent person.
A Caldwell family dealing with the loss of Joe Flores, shot and killed in Nampa. And now they're demanding more answers.
They need to do their job.
From each and every state department in Nampa.
We just want justice for Joey.
A year ago, Joe Flores was shot and killed in the parking lot of the Buffalo Wild Wings in Nampa.
The family now speaking out about what they say is a lack of communication they're getting from city leaders. Our Brenda Rodriguez joins us now with the details. Brenda.
Well, Maggie, Justin, as far as updates, there isn't much that we can report on right now, but Nampa police says that this crime was related to gangs, and they say that getting witnesses to speak out is hard when it comes to those types of cases. The communication between these families and the police department is getting harder to keep as cases continue to stack up, and it's leaving families like the Flores wondering if they're ever going to get closure.
Él no tenía problemas con nadie.
Martín Flores remembers a conversation with his son, Joe Flores.
Y le pregunté, ¿qué quieres para su cumpleaños? Digo, no quiero nada. Digo, después te digo. Porque cada año se lo celebraba su cumpleaños.
Little did he know, it'd be the last one.
They call me and they're like, hey, Joey's hurt.
Joe's brother, Chris Flores, had just flown back home from a work trip when he received the phone call that changed his family's lives.
I see my brother's lifeless body on the black pavement floor and his feet sticking up. And that's when I realized something really bad had happened.
¿Cómo se sintió eso?
No hay palabras para explicar eso. Mal.
On September 1st of 2022, Joe Flores was shot and killed right here in this parking lot in front of Buffalo Wild Wings in Nampa.
I can't even explain the feeling.
The feeling of losing his little brother.
Who had everything going for him. He was living his best life.
Nampa Police Lieutenant Jamie Burns recently took over the investigation. He says the case involves people known to be in gangs.
The way I look at it is, in this shooting scenario, you have an innocent bystander that was shot by a thug, and they took his life.
A year later, the case is still under investigation with no arrests.
So there's several suspects that we have in mind on the entire incident, and then we are narrowing down.
Burns says getting tips from the community is always harder when the crime involves gangs.
I think at the end of the day, the right thing to do is, especially if you know somebody that's a violent person that can commit the same crime again, and you can potentially prevent that.
But patience is running out for the Flores family.
I know they can't tell me much, but I'm like, we're not getting anywhere with this.
Chris says communication with the Nampa Police Department is not what he expected.
The lack of communication from Nampa PD to us and our family, and the lack of information. And every time we talk to them, they just try to spin it off.
And it's something Burns doesn't deny. He says it's a work in progress.
The last time I talked to him, I admitted my faults in that, and I had a million excuses for him. I took over the role of just calling him every 2 weeks or sending a text to him. But again, without having a lot of updates for the case, there wasn't a lot of information.
The lack of information making Flores believe the department is not serving the entire community.
I just feel like just because my brother was Hispanic, they don't want to pay as much attention to his thing.
But Burns says that's not the case.
I think it's fair for them to feel that way. It's not fair for them to think that we operate at that standard. Because of human life, it doesn't matter, again, the color of his skin. It doesn't matter what his past is. Any investigation that we look in, you have to look beyond that.
Another issue, Burns says the department is operating with limited staff, making it harder to keep up with each case.
Every division, from our patrol division to our detectives, they're short-staffed.
He says cases involving violent crimes, domestic violence, and crimes against a person are assigned to a detective and a victim witness coordinator that's responsible for communicating with family.
Regardless of how many cases are coming in, we're still obligated to maintain that open line of communication with our victims and families.
Right now, Burns says the department has 10 detectives, each assigned between 7 to 10 cases.
They're pouring their hearts and souls into this because we all want the cases to be to come to justice and families and victims to be some closure in a case. And I know this family really wants that closure.
And closure is something the Flores family has been waiting over a year for.
Nosotros no queremos problema, no queremos nada. No queremos justicia, que se haga justicia. Sabemos quién fue.
As they wait for answers, memories are the only thing keeping Joey close to their hearts.
Joe was a very kind, loving gentleman that literally would help take his shirt off his back to help anybody.
A murder that left a family with just memories.
Even as simple as going to Walmart and buy groceries, there's all kinds of memories like that, doing silly stuff in the stores. Simple things like that.
On August 2nd, 2008, Brígido Rodriguez received a 3 a.m. phone call regarding his 25-year-old brother, Jose Merced Rodriguez.
I jumped on my car right away and I went straight. I could feel and sense that something was not right, just by the tone of the voice when I received the phone call.
The call was made by Jose's mother-in-law, telling Brígido Jose was headed to the hospital. The Minidoka Sheriff's Department says someone attacked Jose and his wife Karina while they slept in their Rupert home.
From what we understand, a home invasion. The wife woke up to an individual in their bedroom, and the crime scene was pretty horrific. There was blood all over the house.
Case Detective Justin Borden says that they were attacked with a blunt force object, something like a baseball bat or a hammer. Detective Bourne says Karina escaped the scene.
She was able to escape from the residence out of one of the rooms, run to the neighbors who was about 100 yards away, and call for help at that point.
Detective Bourne says that she was questioned during the investigation. After the attack, Brígido says they lost all communication with Karina, but he believes there is still more that she could help with. Karina recovered from minor injuries. Her husband died at the hospital.
Before even my family made it over, a doctor walked in probably, 30, 40 minutes after, and he told us there's nothing we can do. He's dead brain.
Detective Bourne says the suspect has still not been found and all leads have been exhausted, making this now a cold case.
We always ask that the public and anybody else that has information or has details or new information come forward with it and come talk to us at the sheriff's office. And we take every lead and every new piece of information very seriously and follow up on it when those come in.
15 years later, Jose's mom is left to mourn and remember her son.
Que él era una persona muy buena, que le ayudaba a todo el mundo y era como un padre para sus hermanos porque su papá se iba a México, lo dejaba a cargo y él era muy responsable y muy trabajador.
The Minidoka County Sheriff's Office says that this case has remained inactive for a couple years now. But how many cases remain unsolved in the Latino community?
We don't know our number. I mean, we're just getting started. We have not had the resources to be able to go into the local communities and actually go through case files and say this goes onto this list and this goes. We haven't had the resources.
Idaho State Police refers to not knowing the number of overall cold cases in Idaho. To help change that, they are now launching a cold case project to collect general data to help solve more cases.
We are a state agency, and so we bring a lot of resources. But most of these cases are not going to be state police cases. Most of them are cases that are being worked by small local agencies or even bigger urban agencies. So they have the cases that are under their jurisdiction, and it's important for us to bring resources.
Although ISP says they currently aren't tracking data, they estimate at least 130 open homicide investigations, and they're actively working on at least 50 of those cases. They also don't track deeper demographics like ethnicity.
So our focus is, again, solving crime in Idaho. no matter where that crime is, no matter what subpopulations, subcultures that might exist in, because our mission is to solve crime.
But the Idaho Commission on Hispanic Affairs Executive Director Margie Gonzalez says not tracking ethnicity can be an issue, especially in Idaho's fastest growing minority group, Latinos and Hispanic.
But if you think about cold cases, how are we going to identify what communities need additional resources if we're not tracking if we're not tracking them by ethnicity?
Although there's no data showing how many Idaho cold cases involved Hispanic or Latino victims, Gonzalez says many Idaho families whose loved ones are part of a cold case investigation feel like they've been forgotten by state officials, community members, and the media.
I've heard it so many times, Brenda, from families to say, well, my child was not white, so my child has been forgotten.
Do you think that if Jose was a different ethnicity, if he was white, do you think things would be different?
100% sure.
MSD and ISP says every case is just as important to them.
I can tell our Latino community that a victim of a crime is a victim of a crime. We take every crime seriously, we take every victim seriously, and we work through all of our cases with the utmost respect for the families.
A study done by Prison Policy, a nonprofit, says crimes against Black and Latinos are less likely to be solved. Gonzalez says part of that could be because of language barriers and lack of trust in law enforcement.
Distrust is already there, and it's really hard. A lot of our families might come from a country where there's a lot of corruption, and they fear law enforcement. And it's hard to break that. And I think it goes both ways. The relationship building needs to come from law enforcement and from our community. And we're slowly starting to see some progress.
Building community relationships is something MSD and ISP says has been a work in progress.
Our team is about community. It is about building trust.
Like many families waiting on a cold case to be solved, Brígido and his family say they will never lose hope in finding justice.
So from this point on, if we could reactivate this and figure something about it, figure who did it, that will be the ultimate goal for my family. Even though he's never gonna come back, if we know who did it, and we know he's paying for what he did, whoever did this, that will be more than enough for our family.
Pues muy triste. Nada más quedan los recuerdos. Quedaron los recuerdos de él.
Brenda Rodriguez, Idaho